This is my first overseas trip as President of the United States. I'm heading to the G7, then to the NATO ministerial, and then to meet with Mr. Putin to let him know what I want him to know. And at every point along the way, we're going to make it clear that the United States is back and democracies of the world are standing together to tackle the toughest challenges and the issues that matter most to our future.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of Backstory. I'm Dana Lewis. Russia has tested the West on every level. It's interfered in U.S. democracy. It's hacked computer systems, including government systems. It's threatened the U.S. with nuclear weapons and deployed nerve agents at home and abroad. President Putin has abandoned most trappings of modern democracy, arrested his political opposition, intimidated others. Russia is spinning backwards, many say, and no one knows it better than former Prime Minister of Russia, Mikhail Kasyanov, who once served in Putin's government and then tried to run against Putin for president. On Backstory, an exclusive interview with Kasyanov, as this week, U.S. President Biden met with NATO and then Putin himself in a formal Russia-U.S. summit in Europe. All right, joining us now from Moscow, or just outside of Moscow, is former Prime Minister of Russia, Mikhail Kasyanov. Hello, sir.
Hello. Happy to see you.
Good to see you. I hear that you, in the running of your political party, have just received a notice from the Russian government which says what?
That our state registration of political party has been frozen for a 3 months period, exactly the period what is we call parliamentary elections.
So what does that mean? They have essentially either arrested or attempted to assassinate, forcibly closed offices of any political organization in Russia. And you've obviously been given a warning, cease all political activity before the parliamentary elections or else.
Yeah, exactly the case. In our Congress party Congress in March, we discussed this in length, and we called for opposition just to be united. And unfortunately, after that, as you just mentioned, some people were put in jail, some people just go outside or exile, and some people just under home arrest, etc., etc., etc. And we finally got a notice from the government that our state registration has been frozen. It means we have no right to participate in elections. That is, I would say, the KGB strategy to eliminate any risk, even minimal risk.
What are they worried about? Putin says he's so popular, and they say that they are still going to win the Duma elections, even if there are opposition parties. I mean, what are they so worried about?
There is no logic to explain that. That's simply I would say, instructions or mentality. If there is any risk, that should be eliminated if it doesn't create any real danger.
They locked up Alexei Navalny, who you know well.
Right.
They've outlawed his political party as being extremist. I mean, as putting it on parallels with Al-Qaeda or ISIS. This is unheard of. Putin's been in power 21 years. I mean, he's never allowed a real opposition to breathe and to really emerge. But this takes it to a very different level, doesn't it? What's happening there?
Yeah, I think just they simply afraid of any I would say activity, because just the economic situation is worsening every year, every month, and inflation this year started to grow rapidly, and of course they feel that general audience population just angry on authorities, and even when before they asking questions just and couldn't find the answers. Now just the people can't find the answer. Authority, Putin in particular, are responsible for all the problems. We're pumping a lot of oil. We pump a lot of natural gas, a lot of revenue. The international reserves very huge. Budgetary reserves are huge, but people, the level of poor people just growing considerably. It's more than 20 million people already under the level of normal life.
Who is running things in Russia?
Yeah,
because, I mean, there have been political advisors around Putin, and there have been security advisors and the security services around Putin, known as the Soloviki. I apologize for my pronunciation. Has there been a shift now inside the Kremlin, do you think, where the KGB, the FSB is really running the show?
I wouldn't say they're running the show, but I definitely can confirm that during the last few years, the influence of, as you correctly mentioned, Siloviki is growing. And as we have just discussed with you, that even minimum risk for participating in elections was eliminated. That is the policy or feature of the policy of KGB. So that no risk, should be no risk, even a minimum risk, it should be eliminated. It's confirming this feeling. I am sure that my feeling is right, and not only mine, that Siloviki having a growing influence on President Putin, and decision-making process, the inner circle is narrowed down, and just everything goes in this direction. Just pressing, just eliminate all freedoms, eliminate any risk.
Mikhail Kasyanov, Russia was supposed to be a democracy. It emerged from the Soviet Union with a constitution. Do you believe now that Putin can simply change the constitution, extending his term till 2036, arrest, threaten, possibly murder political opposition figures, and that will be accepted by Russians? Or is this a fuse that has been lit, because a lot of Russians now do not recognize Putin as a legitimate authority now?
Yes. Right now, we cannot call just Russia any kind of democratic state. There is no single feature of democracy right now. That's simply authoritarian state, and people living around, and just the state. They didn't elect this state, this system of running, and just Mr. Putin, as you correctly mentioned, with his inner circle, just grabbed the power for a long period of time. I'd like to believe not forever, and of course, it is surprising development, not only for me but for many people. It's surprising that Russian people keep patience. For so many years, we had demonstrations in the streets. We wanted and we demanded from this authority just to respect our constitutional rights. And in return, people got pressure, jail, just beating people on the streets, and people in jail for many years, etc. And people continued to keep patience. That is the question, rhetorical question: how long people would keep this patience? And how long just this authority will go through this path? Of course, it depends not only on negative development inside country, I mean economic and social development, which is, I would say, continue to creating pressure, and not only emotional pressure, but real income problems for people. People cannot keep the same level of their life, and they absolutely envy. But it also developed. It also depends on international attitude to this regime. And I believe just upcoming meeting with President Biden in Geneva, of course, will also demonstrate just, I would say, the readiness of the whole West, readiness to stay on their values. It means not coming to the agreement on human rights violations and allowing Mr. Putin to continue this policy, but saying just very clear no for these repressions and for these violations of human rights. But of course, there could be some issues for, I wouldn't say cooperation, but some kind for interaction and resolving international problems. That is a separate issue.
Right. This is the so-called multilateral issues, where they'll talk about humanitarian assistance in Syria or global warming. Biden says that he wants a stable, predictable relationship with Russia. Do you think that that's wishful thinking given President Putin's intentions?
It depends what we mean predictable. If predictable in terms of international security, of course, it is possible. In terms of strategic balance and keeping non-proliferation regime and secure that, that's absolutely necessary. But other issues like regional conflicts, of course, it's difficult to come to a solution. You mentioned Syria. I don't think it's possible to come to the solution there. Syrian President Assad, together with Mr. Putin and Iran, devastated the country, devastated Syria, and now just humanitarian assistance, only humanitarian, but it's not rebuilding just of the country. That's absolutely serious question. Other regional conflicts, that's also a problem. Ukraine, the most sensitive issue. I don't think it's possible to find a compromise there. There could be, of course, talks, there could be some kind of exchange of arguments, but I don't think there would be a solution, because for Mr. Putin, it's necessary to keep his face. But of course, difficult to imagine for me that the West, unilateral West, would compromise somehow on Ukrainian sovereignty or territorial integrity.
Is Putin using Ukraine as a pressure point with America?
Ukraine, that's important point. It's an important point for the whole West and Europe in particular. It's a testing point whether the West is prepared to stay on the values, on the principles which they do and then announce in every country. And respecting those principles, all those leaders got elected. If they will stop respecting those principles, and they will never be elected again. And this is a completely clear issue. The democratic system in each of those countries, that is prevailing theme.
But a test of what, though? Ukraine is not a member of NATO. It's just it's a test in terms of the respecting post-Soviet borders and boundaries. Ukraine
wants to be a member of European Union. Ukraine wants to be a member of NATO, and Ukraine wants to keep the territorial integrity, which was recognized after the Second World War and after the collapse of Soviet Union. That is one goes for another. Just that is absolutely clear. And the whole world would like this. Not new. I would say changes of borders. Not new cutting this. This is absolutely clear. That is the whole European security based on that. This is OSCE charter, just the main basis for European security.
But you know that Putin accuses the West of lighting a fire in Ukraine, and he blames the West for any unrest in Ukraine, and he pretends to be a moderator, a mediator with the areas of eastern Ukraine like Donetsk. What is the reality?
That is why I'm answering your question that I cannot believe there would be a compromise found during that meeting or just follow-up meetings, because that is completely different positions of Mr. Putin and the whole world. And I think just the problem of Eastern Ukraine or problem of annexation of Crimea was not recognized for any single, I would say, two single countries in the world. Even Belarus didn't recognize annexation of Crimea. That means just that is the very I would say fragile position on that.
As we speak, President Biden is sitting around a table with NATO countries. And as you know, a lot of those NATO countries they include the Baltics, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, and their leaders see Putin as a major threat, even Poland, believing that he is expansionist, that he wants to create turmoil on his borders, just not in Ukraine, just not in his relationship with Belarus and President Lukashenko. But in the end, he aims to upset any stability within NATO countries as well. Do you think that they overstate the dangers?
No, they have the reason. They have reasons to be afraid of that. And that's absolutely clear that Baltic states, they were not long ago, just part of totalitarian Soviet Union. They understand Putin's mentality and Putin's inner circle mentality of that. That's why they have reasons for that. And they understand, and that it's not only for them, it's clear that Ukraine, that is the sensitive point. If West would come to some kind of compromise of Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity, of course, that will be multiplied, reasons will be multiplied for creating dangers for Baltic states in particular. That's why leaders of those countries I would say, continue to insist of strong position on that. I can easily understand leaders of those Baltic states and Poland, including Poland. That's absolutely clear, just what they're afraid of.
Do you think that Putin has changed? We've been watching him for 21 years. You were his prime minister early on.
Absolutely different Putin at that time. That was 20 years ago. That was absolutely different Putin. At that time, Putin supported democratic reforms, reforms in the economy, and that's at that time just we had economic growth of 7%, and we have there were a few cases of violation of human rights, but it was a policy. It was some kind of mistakes. But on the later stage, of course, now we see completely different Putin. At that time, there was pro-democratic Putin. And remember, we had excellent relations with the European Union and with the United States. And now just Putin called the West as our enemies. And even our military doctrine has been changed during the last 15 years. That is two completely different ways and two completely different policies. That's why I'm in a position, because I cannot accept any feature of this policy Mr. Putin started to pursue starting with 2008, 2007, 2008, when he just pronounced his speech in Munich conference. And then next year in 2008, there was a war in Georgia. And then as a result of not appropriate attitude to the Putin's behavior in Georgia, we got annexation of Crimea and the war in eastern Ukraine. That is everything is interconnected.
When you mentioned the Munich speech, was that the speech where he talked about the collapse of the Soviet Union being one of the biggest tragedies of the last century?
At that time, he warned the West that he wants his regime to be recognized as a decent one, and he wanted immediate recognizance on that, so that not to press him on human rights violations, etc. It was at that time, you remember, so-called sovereign democracy, and that was his understanding what democracy in Russia should be, and his personal interpretation of human rights and other features of democratic state. And West didn't take it seriously. And next year, just on a NATO summit, Georgia and Ukraine was denied to get the roadmap for NATO potential future entry. And that was a signal for Mr. Putin just to immediately start pressing. He understood that the West is not prepared to tackle the problems up here at that time.
If you say that the West has not dealt with him properly, didn't take his threat seriously, didn't really push and press and corner Russia in the past the way they should have, what should they do now? There are economic sanctions in place over Crimea and the Ukraine. There's been a lot of calls by people like Bill Browder to make them much tougher, to go after his inner circle. What is the answer?
I think the answer is very clear. Continue to believe that, for the Western leaders, continue to believe that you are absolutely correct in respecting democratic features of all your countries, and including neighbor countries like Ukraine and Russia including. And that's Russia is a member of OSCE, and Russia is a member of Council of Europe. And Russia must respect all those obligations. And of course, our partners, because the West is our partner and all those agreements, they should tell to us, to Russia, to Putin's regime, that is inappropriate behavior. And
but they have. They've denounced so many of the things that he's done, right, including the jailing of Navalny, the attempted poisoning of Navalny, the deployment of Novichok. Okay, so you tell him, then what?
Yeah, Mr. Putin wants finally that the West will be tired of that and come to compromise. That's what I'm saying. Continue to believe that Russia could be a normal country, just this regime is temporal, and Mr. Putin have problems now just with the economy. And there is no single reform pursued right now, and even with the very good high prices on international markets, Russian economy cannot work appropriately, because that is because of Putin's regime, because of political pressure, political squeezing of everything, unchangeable government on all levels, and because of huge corruption, and because of inability to pursue any economic and social reforms. That means just the regime is on a dire straits. That's why there is no need to support and pull out Mr. Putin's regime out of the problems he brought the country.
You're saying the international community should hold the line. You don't necessarily call for tighter sanctions. You say hold the line with existing sanctions, and that will accomplish what in the end?
Yeah, we all have just a list of misdeeds and all necessary reactions which West evaluated. All those reactions already given, done. If other misdeeds appear, that is for Western leaders to consider. I cannot prescribe just what should be done, but I'm just simply observing what's going on. And of course, I'm standing on democratic principles and believe my country soon will be again democratic state and even better than before. But of course, I'd like my people of my country would realize what's going on. And that's the Western leaders, the West, have no dual, I would say, standards. If the West announced we want Russia to be a democratic state, and by constitution, even by this changed constitution, I would say Western constitution, major aspects of democratic state still written there, but authorities don't respect them at all.
You say that you have hope for democracy in Russia and that you're hoping that soon Russia would become democratic again. It seems like you are slipping further and further away from at least the 90s, when there was a brief flirtation with a real democracy.
Of course, I am could be seen as a dreamer, but unfortunately today, as we started during the beginning of our discussion, we lost. I mean, the democratic movements in Russia lost the momentum of pressing authorities and bring them to changes, and that's why we're in a dark period. That's correct. That's a dark period, and that's why my I would say explanation of future changes looks like absolute dream. But I'm sure that not tomorrow, but soon, changes would come. Changes are inevitable.
You think changes are inevitable because the tougher the authorities get on Russian people, the greater the chance that people will not stand for it anymore? Russian people, I would say, realization or recognition of everything what's going on is maturing, and people coming to the right understanding where is the source of problems, who is responsible for. It's for internal part, and for external part. If West stay without compromises with this regime, it means just the situation stay as it is. But it's not stay as it is. With the same circumstances, with same conditions, but the regime would start weakening very rapidly. How rapidly? How rapidly?
Okay.
How rapidly?
How rapidly? How rapidly? um, we have so-called just elections. That's absolute imitation, which we always had an imitation of elections, but this will be absolute farce. And that will be another feature for people to take a note. And then we have just elections in 24. And during this period of time, just people's real income and the style of life and the whole atmosphere worsening very rapidly, and even morally, especially for middle class living in big cities. People simply hate everything was going around. They just in a nervous situation, but they're afraid to go to the streets. They're afraid to protect their constitutional rights on the streets by demonstration. But sooner or later, a wider part of population, bigger part of population, not necessarily educated people in the big cities, would also come to the conclusion they live in a very poor situation. The level of poverty, as I said, just very high right now. It's continued to increase. And that will be a maturing of negative attitude. And again, as I said, just if there is no support from outside, economic situation would contract, will decrease just very rapidly. It means changes could be in 1 year time, or could be in half a year time, or could be a 3 year time. But that's what the horizon which I describe from today's understanding of the reality.
Last question to you. I was shocked by a poll that Levada just did recently on how many people in different age groups in Russia want to leave the country.
That's exactly confirming what I have just said. You notice that 48% of young people up to 25 years, half of young people would like to depart from Russia because they don't see future for themselves.
That is shocking by any.
And
I can't
35% of the most productive population, like 25 up to 40 years old. Each thought, just the sort of this part of population would like to depart, because people understand that repressions are going, and any attempt to protect your rights, just facing big problems, and that's why people just simply cannot fight with this. They are not prepared to fight with this repressive machine. That is disaster.
And unfortunately, hope is fading for a lot of people that there's going to be change sooner than later, and peaceful change. And because the hold by Putin and the Kremlin on society just seems never ending.
It could be, as I said, just very soon, just other sector of population, other part of population would start fighting for their rights, but not even for their rights, for their lives. That's coming to more dangerous development. That's your warning is absolutely correct. I agree and share your concerns on that. Unfortunately, authorities don't want to understand what's going on in the country and where we're heading to. Unfortunately, they just like closing eyes and we're going in tunnel. And that is unfortunate development. And that is what, as you mentioned, Levada Center sociological polls just demonstrating what people's feeling is.
Mikhail Kasyanov, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was absolutely great. Thank you.
To be precise, the number of young Russians who would like to move out of their home country has soared to a 10-year high, according to an independent Levada Center poll. According to Levada's latest results, 53% of Russian respondents aged 18 to 24 would like to emigrate. This marks a 16% increase in 5 months and is the highest share of respondents since 2009. That tells you a lot about the economy in Russia, about opportunity, and about attitudes towards Putin and his political repressions. Please subscribe to this podcast and share it. We are now in our third season and growing. I'm Dana Lewis. Thanks for listening to Backstory, and I'll talk to you again soon.